In this video, we'll talk about circles and we'll start off with the perimeter or circumference. The basics of circles is really important. Every circle has a center, so this kind of central point. Right down here you can see I'm shading it in blue. A radius, which is the distance from the center of the circle to any one of the edges. So I'm going to label this down here as R, that's our radius. And the diameter. And the diameter is the distance all the way across a circle. We often show this line or dotted line kind of horizontally, but you could have it in any direction. So for example, diameter could be diagonal this way. It could be vertical. So the diameter is cutting across, basically cutting the circle in half. So those parts of the circle are really important for us to know, that the radius and the diameter are two vocabulary words. And when we look at what happens here when we break up a circle, we have a radius and another radius together make up the diameter. So in other words, the diameter is a radius multiplied by 2, and a radius is the diameter cut in half. And that's very important for us when we face questions for perimeter and area of circles. So let's look at that again in a visual format, nicely laid out. The radius is half the length of the diameter. The diameter is twice the length of the radius. And if we want to calculate the perimeter of a circle or the outside measurement of a circle, we use a special name of circumference. The formula is circumference or perimeter of a circle is pi multiplied by the diameter. In every circle, the ratio of circumference to diameter is pi. We're going to be using questions that either give us the diameter directly or give us the radius, and then we have to first calculate the diameter before we can calculate the circumference. So what about pi? You may have a calculator that has a pi button on it, or you may not. If you don't have one, that's okay. We have free calculators online, and the one that I like the most is the one that's on piday.org. And there's a link to that website in the Moodle unit for Shape and Space near the bottom of the section. The textbook, unfortunately, is not consistent. In the first lessons, so like today's lesson, they're going to use rounded pi, 3.14, to get the answers in the answer key. Later in the unit, when we go up to the Shape and Space unit, we're going to start using the pi button. On the assignments, exams, we always let you know what we want. So we will indicate that we want the pi button, for example. The answers aren't radically different, but because pi is it's a number that never terminates, so it's an irrational number, your calculator is going to have a far longer decimal than our rounded values. So the answers could be different by a little bit, or could be different by quite a bit, depending on how large the circle is. So let's get started with the example on page 82. It's asking us to calculate the perimeter of the following circles. So we're going to have to do two separate calculations. And then here we're going to round to the hundredths place. Again, the book is not consistently telling us where to round. Don't worry about that. On an exam, we will always tell you where to round. So what we have here for our bigger circle is they have provided us with the diameter, and I like to label that right away. We want the perimeter of the circles, which is the circumference, so we're going to use the formula circumference is equal to pi times the diameter. We're going to use rounded pi for this example, so circumference is going to be 3.14 multiplied to the diameter, which is 6 meters. Again, we're not going to have squared units here. We are measuring around this circle as though we take string and then lay the string out flat to get a linear measurement. So on our calculator, we put in 3.14 times 6, and we get 18.84. That's already at the hundredths place, so we don't need to do any rounding there. 18.84 meters. For our second circle, we are only provided with the radius. So we only have half the diameter. So we have to make sure that we don't use that value. We're going to take the radius and we're going to double it, multiply it by 2. So we're going to take 2 times 5. So our diameter is 10 centimeters. With that, then we can solve. The circumference is pi times the diameter, and I write that every single time for myself. It's very helpful to write the formulas down instead of just going ahead and grabbing your calculator. And then we write down what we're doing. We're multiplying 3.14 times 10. So the circumference here is going to be 31.4 centimeters. Again, we don't need to round, so we just leave the answer as it is. The questions that we just did are pretty straightforward. You see the picture, you see the diameter, you see the radius, you've got your formula, you substitute, and you solve. It's the word problems where we get a story where we don't have any visual clues. Those are the ones that are more challenging. When we see this student example on page 82, it's asking us to find the distance around a circular garden that has a 15-meter path running from one side to the other through the center. If we are going to be successful in this unit, my recommendation is to always draw. So when you draw, again, it solidifies your understanding and it slows you down. I can't draw a circle save my life, but that's good enough. So I'm going to be looking for the distance around, and so that information lets me know that I'm looking for the perimeter. So I'm looking for the perimeter or the circumference of the circle, and the path is running from one side all the way to the other side. So that path they're giving me is the diameter. So the diameter is 15 meters. I'm calculating circumference, which is pi times the diameter, and I'm going to use rounded pi here, 3.14 multiplied to 15 meters. When I go ahead and do that, so I'm going to grab my calculator, 3.14 times 15, so we get a value of 47.1, and that's 47.1 meters all the way around that circular garden. In the exercise, it'll be important for you with word problems to consider drawing a picture. We know for this lesson we're solving circumference of circle questions, but later we may have a mixture of circumference or area of circles, and that's where drawing a picture and writing down all the information you have to determine what to do will be more important. The exercise questions on pages 83 up to page 87 are all good, gives you a lot of variety for different shapes and a lot of different types of perimeter questions.